talking, but this is the
And
best
we
part
are-
where I get to see them.
And we are live on YouTube. Yes, it's cloudy. We had, did anybody in, I guess, Southwestern Ontario go observing this weekend? We had this like amazing break in the clouds for like 2 nights. It was beautiful.
I did. I have a story about that.
Oh. Did you see anything exciting?
Yeah, so I'm doing the Isabel Williams Lunar Observing Program. And at the back of the program, under the optional section, there are libration features. And so I had it on my calendar that that I could see the Mare Orientale this weekend. So I got the scope set up on Friday night, and then I went out on Saturday morning, got up at before 5:30 on Saturday morning, went outside with the telescope and saw it.
You're committed. It takes a lot for you to get up that early.
Yeah. I actually had there were 3 items to get, and I got all 3 on that section of the moon. So,
yeah. Isabel Williams, I will be really excited when I print that certificate for you one day. It's a challenge.
So I'm only missing 1 item of the, I don't know, there's almost 700 things to see or something like that.
All I know is there's close to 1,000.
Yeah.
So yeah, if anybody gets really good at explore the moon and they want to keep going, you'll spend a lot of time with the Isabel Williams certificate. Okay, so now that everybody's kind of followed in, YouTube's going up. Yes, we said there was clear skies. Unfortunately, they have gone away, but hopefully everybody enjoyed if they got it. And welcome back to the first episode of 2023. Still getting used to writing that and saying it, of Insider's Guide to the Galaxy. And as of the tradition of last year, and I don't know if we did the year before, we are going to be reviewing things to look out for in the coming year. Before we get into that, I just want a quick announcement for RASC members. We have another Explore the Night Sky event happening next Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. This is 7 p.m. A little bit later, I think, actually, than normal. Not 7 p.m. I think it's 8:45 p.m. Sorry, 8:45 p.m. Eastern till about 10:15, where we go live onto the robotic telescope that we have located down in California, and we give you a tour of how the equipment works. About half an hour later, when astronomical twilight hits, we start taking pictures based on your requests, and then we put up a photo run for the night, and you get the data from that the next night. I will say though, it is all weather dependent, so I will be emailing up the day of if it's going to be, if it's a no-go, I'll email early in the day around 4:30. If it's a go, I email you the link. You have to be a RASC member to do this, and I'll throw the link in the chat. But it is that time of year where it might be cloudy or too rainy. But please sign up. And nothing else super exciting yet happening at the national level, but we're always working on stuff, so coming up soon. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Chris.
Thank you. So yeah, looking at the current edition of Sky News magazine, Canada's astronomy magazine, Brian Ventrudo published his usual annual article on his picks for the year. A few of us have been doing that. Alan Dyer also published an online article on his picks for the year, and I had already done some of my own note-taking way back when. So I thought it'd be a great time to sort of do a compilation. So we're going to review Brian's set of 10. I think I've got another 12 on top of that. And some of mine are also what some of Alan Dyer pointed out. So that'll be fun. Before I do that, though, I'm going to share my screen and mention a couple other things before we get started. So here we go. So first up, I want everybody to remember to give some love to the sun. The sun is in the upswing. We're in an active cycle. We're building an active cycle right now. And I got alerted to the fact reminded of the fact from Andrea Girones, who published a fantastic image of the sun taken from the ground the other day. And if you want to know what's up with the sun, if you've got eclipse viewers or white light filter for your astronomical telescope, or a solar telescope, a PST or a Coronado or a Lunt, dust it off, get outside with it, because the sun is really spotty this week in particular. So I was out yesterday or the day before, last sunny day, and I counted, I had my PST out. I used my eclipse viewers and I could see naked eye this one big spot. I think it's number 2190 or something. Here it is here. It's active region 3190. I could see it barely with through my glasses and my eclipse viewers over top. So you see if you can manage that if you've got sunny skies where you are. And if you want to check what the sun's doing these days, I always go to spaceweather.com, check out the thumbnail of the sun on the left-hand side, click that, and that brings up the full view. Now this image is from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. So it's actually a satellite that takes pictures of the sun. But this heliospheric and magnetic imager instrument, HMI, shows nicely the sort of what you would see in a kind of a personal solar telescope with the Etalon tuned away from the proms and towards the sunspots. You're going to see the dark centers, the kind of gray or outer lighter colored rims, and then the granulation, some of the granulation and the plages of the white areas. So anyway, one cool thing to note about these sunspots, I counted, I think, around 27 the other day, big and small. And look at this, they're all grouped at the same latitude, north and south of the sun's equator. And this is how sunspots work. They kind of work this way, because they're produced by the sun's magnetic field. There's some polar symmetry to them that way. So you can sort of see a band of them across here and a band of them across there. So that's really cool.
Chris,
So that's,
with the solar viewing, I have heard that sometimes you can see things through clouds. Like, what would you be able to see if it was lightly cloudy outside through a solar scope?
yeah, you can see the bigger spots for sure through the clouds. In fact, often if you're viewing through the eyepiece, you'll see the kind of the waves of the clouds drifting past your field of view. And then you can wait for the sort of thinner patch and thicker patch to give you glimpses. But definitely don't expect to see the fine details, the small spots with clouds. But yeah, sunspots are great for clouds. The solar telescopes, the prominences and things like that, I find they don't really work when it's even thin cloud. So, but we've got so many spots to enjoy, then that's a great thing to check out.
And then we just had another comment, which leads into this year is a big year for solar observing in the next little bit. Rask is developing solar viewers. Well, we're going to be ordering them to be distributed in time for this fall's partial solar eclipse. That will you'll see most of it in the West Coast, but I think you can still see a decent amount in Ontario area, as well as that's October, and then which we'll talk about as well as there's one coming up total right through Southern Ontario in 2024. So learn how to view the sun, because there's some good events coming up soon.
Yes. Yeah, we'll come back to a bit more detail about the October eclipse in a few minutes here. All right, so starting off, I think the big news of the week or currently is the bright comet that you've all heard about on social media. Maybe not so much the news, but definitely on social media, all over Instagram and Twitter and things like that. The green comet that you may have heard about. Comets look green in a telescope because they've got diatomic carbon being sort of outgassed from their comas, and when that's radiated by the solar radiation, it gives off green photons of light. So you get a greenish glow of comets. And it's really cool if you do have a chance to see a comet, a decently bright comet through a telescope or binoculars. If it's really bright, then you do see that green color. It's really one of the neat things in astronomy that you get to see. So let's talk about the comets here. I'm just going to sort these by date. So I have my, and by the way, for a change, I've set my stellarium to Saskatoon. I figured it's sort of in the middle of the country, and it'll give you a sense of where things are visible from, kind of from central Canada out from there. So there are two comets that are observable in the nighttime sky right now. The big famous one everyone's talking about is this comet C2022 E3 ZTF. ZTF stands for the Zwicky Transient Facility. It's a camera system that's on one of the I think it's around a 1 meter telescope on Mount Palomar in California, and it takes wide field views of the sky looking for things that are moving around that we need to keep track of. And it detected a couple of comets. Both of these comets are ZTF comets. The first one here was discovered in 2020, but the bright one that we're focusing on right now was discovered in 2022. The E3 means it's the third comet discovered in the fifth fortnight of the year. So first 2 weeks of January is A, second 2 weeks of January is B, and so on and so on. So that would make it March sometime, third comet discovered in March. And was done by the ZTF instrument. So I'm just going to click here and show you where it is. So it's been a pre-dawn object primarily for the past little while. It's now starting to move nicely into the evening sky because it's heading towards the North Celestial Pole, which brings it northerly enough that it's above the horizon. It's been kind of traveling through Corona Borealis. Here's Bootes, Hercules, and at the moment, I've got the sky shown for tonight at 8 p.m. This is the comet with the cursor, the sort of crosshairs around it here, just to show you where that goes. And this comet is actually riding upwards towards the North Celestial Pole. Perihelion was January 12th, so that's when it was closest to the sun. And it's really diving down through the plane of the solar system. Let me give you an idea of how that looks. Just bring up this view first. So this is Samantha can put the link in the chat for this webpage. It's from theskylive.com. And it's a 3D model of the solar system and the comet's orbit. Here's the comet's orbit. You can see it's kind of at not quite right angles, maybe 70 degrees to the plane of the solar system. And you can see here that this is today's date, January 17. Here's the sun, here's Earth's orbit, here's the comet. And it was kind of, will be closest to the Earth on the 1st of February. So just advance up to the 1st of February here. Here we go. So on the 1st of February, it's going to be nearest to the Earth. That's when comets are typically look their brightest and largest, is when they're near perigee. So that's exciting. In the process of doing that, it's expected to continue to brighten up a little bit. It's been, I think, around magnitude, what did I say here? 6, 7, 8 in that range. This is reporting 6.7. We're hoping if you plot the observations on the curve, it's predicted to get up to potentially magnitude 5 around the 1st of February. So definitely you want to keep an eye on it. To find it, what you can do is kind of look for, the tip of the Big Dipper's handle and get yourself sort of in the right department. You've got the Eltanin in Draco. You've got the tip Alkaid at the tip of the Big Dipper's handle. It's going to be, the comet itself is going to march north by about, I think it's about a thumb's width every night. So if I just advance the date here, you can see how it's hopping up. And in terms of sort of making it easier for you to spot it, you can wait for these milestones. So on the 23rd of January, it's going to be quite close to the bright star Edasich. So that's going to be about a finger's width, about less than a degree, a finger's width from that star. If we keep going up, then it's going to pass near Kochab, which is a relatively visible star from the suburban skies. That'll be about, this green circle is binoculars, by the way, so it'll share a binoculars field of view with Kochab on that date, on the 27th, and then 28th, 29th. Remember, it's going to be at its peak on February 1st. So it's not really going to be, near anything, any big sort of signposts in the sky, but hopefully it's bright enough that you won't need them, that you'll be able to see it with your binoculars, maybe unaided eyes, fingers crossed, both for it to brighten and for clear skies around the 1st. Don't worry if you miss it on the 1st, check your forecast, get it on the 31st of Jan or the 2nd of February, do your best, but take a look. Couple more milestones to watch out for. After its peak on the 1st, it's going to dip into Capella, into Auriga. It's going to be really close to Capella on the 5th. So again, that'll make it easy to find in the sky. And then the next day, it's going to be down here near these 3 stars near Capella. These are called the kids. Capella is the goat star. So these are the baby goats. These are the kids. And it's going to be very, very close, telescope close to Sakvateni on the 6th of February. And then I think there's a couple more events to watch for here. Let's see. Acela. And then it's going to go right past Mars. So on Feb 10, 11, there'll be binoculars close, not quite telescope close. And I've got to note that it's 1.6 degrees away from Mars on the 10th, which would be a low power eyepiece in your telescope. So that'd be cool. And then finally, it's going to dip down and go through near Aldebaran. So lots of opportunities, lots of cool things to see that comet do over the next little bit, if we're lucky enough to get clear skies. So take pictures, share your reports, and those of us without clear skies will live vicariously through you all.
We
That's
have
comet. Yeah, go ahead.
We have a question in the chat. Is this in a specific Stellarium catalog you can download? How did you get this to be able to display in Stellarium?
So Stellarium does automatic updates of its databases in the background. So that comet should be in your database already if you're running, if you've allowed your Stellarium to kind of check the internet recently. If you need to force the update, you can go into the configuration window, go into your plugins, scroll through to where you see Solar System Editor, hit configure, and then under Solar System, then you can import orbital elements, choose comets, select a bookmark, which is the Minor Planet Center's list of observable comets, and then click get. You want to replace the list or overwrite the list, just overwrite an update existing and say, okay, might take a moment. I'm not going to do it now because I don't want to waste the bandwidth on that. And that should make sure it's added to your Stellarium if it's not already in there. Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's the one. So as I say, right now as we stand tonight, it's not terribly high in the sky until later in the evening. So if you do want to stay up, here we are on the 17th, you want to get up, see how it sort of skims across the northern horizon. So it's not going to be particularly good to see it in the evening tonight, but over the next few nights, it'll march higher and that'll make it better. All right, so the other comet is the one that was discovered in 2020. It's not as bright. So C2020 V2. It's going to be available during evenings throughout from now until mid-March in Canada. It's about magnitude 10.5, so it's a telescope comet. It passed about 2 AU from the Earth a week or so ago, and it's going to fade a little in brightness, and then it'll disappear at perihelion as it sort of passes the sun around May 8th, and then it'll return to view later in the year. It'll actually pass the Earth again, even closer, 1.9 AU from the Earth, when it's departing the solar system on September 17th, and then it's predicted to ramp up to magnitude 10.5 again. So if you're looking for it, here's the sky tonight. What's really neat is that it's actually on this cool trajectory from Polaris to the star Rukba, which is the shallower V in Cassiopeia. So if you find Polaris in the sky, find the shallower V and stay on that line, then you're going to pick up the comet. So tonight, here it is. And also you can look for these medium stars in your binoculars, 31, 5, 43, Omega, and so on. You can see this sort of distinctive kind of row or arc of stars. Then the comet's going to be just a little bit above those. Tomorrow night, a little bit higher. So it's only about a finger's width higher every night. Next. And what's cool is that if you're lucky enough to have clear skies around the 25th, 26th, 27th, then it's going to share the eyepiece view with Rukba itself. So that's a neat one to go. Another thing that's going to happen is if you're an imager, you can wait for the 28th. Is it the 28th? 28th, 29th. It's going to pass very, very close to this Sharpless object. This is one of the Sharpless emission nebulas. It's Sharpless 2-188. So that'll make a nice deep field view. And then on the February 8th, 7, 8. Where's my view here? It's going to be coming up to, I guess maybe it's the 9th. Sort of 8th, 9th. It's not going to pass exactly close, but there's the little dumbbell. This is Messier Whoops, no, just the Little Dumbbell Nebula, NGC 651. So if you've got a wide enough camera field of view, you can pick it up on there. So those are a couple of neat things you can look for. I think there was one more I had on the 13th. So this star Nimbus, which is a magnitude 3.5, it's a naked eye star if your skies aren't too washed out, and you'll be able to use that star to locate the comet on the 13th as well. So only one more comet worth mentioning that I noted for the year is that, periodic comets, we predict when they come back. These comets are not periodic necessarily, although the media are saying that the green comet 2022 has been 50,000 years since its return, that kind of thing. But the shorter period comets, things like Halley's Comet and Swift-Tuttle, things like that, they come back on a regular cycle. And so Comet Hartley, which is number 103P Hartley, it's predicted to get up to magnitude 7.5 in September, when it'll be only 0.39 astronomical units from Earth. So that'll be a neat one to look for. All right, I'll stop for a second. Any questions, Samantha, on any of that?
I don't see so. I have kind of a question related to comets, and we've been talking about new comets. So we know when, we know Halley's Comet comes every so often. How much advance notice do we usually get when we discover a new comet? So say there was one this year, would we have to wait to would be able to see it the night after it was discovered? Or
It depends on when we spot it. Some comets, if they come in, if they're diving in, from the direction that the sun is in, that we don't pick them up until they're already kind of upon us. That sometimes happens. I think there's a comet, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but there was one discovered last year that's super far out in the solar system. And people have their eye on that, hoping that it becomes a nice bright one. Maybe it's this one, maybe it's the Comet E3, I can't remember, but I thought it was going to be taking a while to get here. So it varies. Yeah, some of them we see, if we're lucky enough to spot them early on, then we get a lot of advance notice. Some of them we just, oops, they're here, and almost before you know it, they're gone.
So the 2022 one, then you were saying they think it has such a long orbital period, they've probably spotted it way ahead before with the sky survey versus some people on the ground seeing it from Earth.
No, it was literally discovered to science, to astronomers, basically in March of 2022.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, some of the news stories say the Neanderthals probably saw it last time it came. Who knows how bright it was then, if that's the case, but as far as modern science goes, this is when we rediscovered it, if you'd like.
And John in the chat also made a comment. So many comets depend on if they survive the trip around the sun or not. Yes. Once discovered.
Yes. Yeah. So some of them, they'll put on a show for the Southern Hemisphere observers, and then we have to wait our turn until after perihelion for us to take a look. And sometimes they don't make it, and so we lose out. That does happen. And
comets are very interesting targets. I don't know if I've ever seen one. So good.
Fingers crossed that it pans out to be as well as we hoped. I mean, Neowise wasn't as spectacular as people were hyping it up to be, but it was neat. And it's the kind of thing where you could show a family member and they'd say, oh yeah, that's cool. It wouldn't blow their socks off, but it would definitely be a raised eyebrow. So that's not bad, but let's hope this is better.
I'm just fingers crossed I'll be alive in 2061 when Halley's Comet comes back around next.
Well, 1986 it came back and it was kind of a bust. So yeah. I would trade something brand new that's spectacular for
something new.
a return that's not as impressive. All right, let's move on. I'm going to start dipping into the events of the year. I'm going to go chronologically, basically, from the start of the year onward. The first one up is one of Brian Ventrudo's picks. And by the way, you might notice some slight date differences between what's in the magazine and what I'm showing you on Stellarium. Depending on how you record the date time of events. So for example, the Observer's Handbook lists events on their monthly pages. I don't have it handy, but it's around. And they use essentially a program to determine, say, when two planets are at their closest together. That's when they report the event. But those planets might not be above the horizon for us when that happens for Canadians. So it might actually be the best night to actually see that event might be the previous evening or the following morning than the date indicated in the handbook. So that's why you sometimes might see a day difference. But since I'm actually using Stellarium to show the events, then you can trust the event, trust the date and time displayed in the bottom left corner of my screen as the date and time it will be happening. So this is Brian's number one. This is January 22nd. It's when Venus is going to kiss Saturn. Again, this is actually a binoculars field of view, about a 10 by 50 pair of binoculars roughly. You can see on the previous couple of nights. So we've got Saturn being carried sunward by the entire sky towards the west, while Venus is swinging away from the sun at the same time. So they're going to pass each other closely on the 22nd. They'll be easily within a telescope eyepiece field of view, just a fraction of a degree apart that night. So that'll be spectacular. In a telescope, Venus will be not quite round. It's almost a full disk. Saturn will, of course, be its full disk. Obviously, the warning about any of these events I'm showing that are occurring around after sunset or before sunrise is you must be sure to wait till the sun is below the horizon before using optics to search for any of these events, binoculars or telescopes. So that's the first one. Next one is a Chris one. This is going to be on the 28th of January. And this is going to be an easy way to see Uranus in binoculars and a telescope if you haven't already seen them. And that's because it's going to be parked at this nice convenient spot near the first quarter moon. This is around 8 p.m. Don't forget the moon moves by its diameter every hour. So those viewing this event, this is Saskatoon, those viewing the event at 8 o'clock, in Montreal or in the Maritimes, the moon will be farther from Uranus by a couple of lunar diameters. And anybody in the West and the West Coast will see the moon even closer to Uranus. So I'm just going to kind of center here on the moon and advance the time. So you can see how the moon is getting closer and closer. So there'll be a really nice close pass to the moon, really wherever you are. So that's actually going to be, let's see if I got the measuring tool here. So that's about, so in Saskatoon, central Canada, that's about a degree's worth or fingers worth of gap between them. But as I said, it's going to be even less of that spacing. And you'll have, so this Omicron Arietis and Sigma Arietis star, not quite as bright as Uranus. So Uranus will stand out. I looked at Uranus through my binoculars during the total lunar eclipse, and it was dead obvious which one it was. So I'm sure you'll be able to see Uranus and be guaranteed to have seen it if you use this this pairing up. All right, next one.
We have a question about that one.
Okay, I'll go back.
Would the moon brightness not wash out the actual view of Uranus?
It can, yes. So what you want to do is you want to, once you've got the kind of positioning or everything, you want to hide the moon outside the edge of your binoculars. So kind of offset the binoculars to keep the moon from being too bright in the view.
Use the moon to help you find it, but then just shift out of view.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
A lot of times when I write my celestial events for the month, I don't mention when the moon is beside Neptune or beside Uranus necessarily, because it's often a full moon and it's why bother. So that's a good question. Thanks for asking. That's a good point. In this case, it's a half moon, so it's not quite so bad. All right,
I'm just gonna also write, so these are Chris's additions to the Sky News top 10 events, and I put a link in the chat and the description box. If you're interested in reading that article, you also have one on your, it's also the top story in Sky News Jan-Feb issue.
Yeah, it's both in print and on the web. Okay, so next one is Brian's number 2 event. That's February 22nd. It's this neat pairing of the moon, the young crescent moon near Jupiter in the sky, with Venus gleaming below them. That'll be a very nice photo op, picturesque scene. This is the scene for 7:30 local time. And of course, you'll be able to watch these as they set, the sky gets darker around them. Look for earth shines. So look for the lightening of the rest of the moon's disk produced by sunlight reflected off the Earth and back onto the moon that night. That'll be a neat one. Okay, what's up next? We've got another Jupiter event. So after that event with Jupiter and the moon, Jupiter is going to be, again, running down towards the sun or west with the rest of the sky and the constellations around it, while Venus is swinging away from the sun. So that means on the 1st of March, then we'll get this great pairing of these two brilliant planets, Venus and Jupiter. The asteroid Vesta will be hanging out, lurking in the area too. Vesta is quite dim, so you won't be able to see that without seeking it out in your telescope. But this kind of, I kind of nicknamed this the Christmas star phenomenon. So an event like this could easily be the explanation for some of the stories around some brilliant celestial object in the sky that people would have seen, in ancient times. So that'll be a really neat event. And they're close enough to look at, obviously, in binoculars for a number of nights. So say from the, 26, 7, 8, 9 into the next month, but definitely telescope. They'll share the eyepiece on the 1st. So that's a cool one. Up next, we've got, let's see, that's March 24th. So this is another Brian one. And for this one, I need to give myself a 0 horizon because we're dealing with Mercury. So let's get rid of here we go. So on this night, we've got a neat event where we've got Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, and the beautiful crescent moon all sort of lined up in the sky. So that'll be a really nice thing to look for. Mercury is going to be a bit of a challenge to see, but if you've got a haze-free, cloud-free vista to the west, definitely pick it up. Obviously, here you can see that Mercury and Jupiter will be about on either side of the binocular field. So once you've got Jupiter spotted, then put Jupiter on the edge of the field, and then you should be able to find Mercury. And again, you just sort of have to watch your timing. When the sky's a bit brighter, Mercury will be harder to see, but then as it gets lower, we're looking through more air. So it's kind of a tricky trade-off, but good luck. See if you can see that one. That's the 24th. Next one is, I've got one from me. It's March 27th. So a few days later, there's the 24th, okay? 25th, 26th, 27th, Mercury and Jupiter tight together, again, passing each other in the night, so to speak. And so they'll be decently close to one another on these 3 nights, the 26th, the 27th, especially, and then the 28th. So that's a neat one to look at. And of course, Venus will still be up there with them as well. All right, what's next? We've got a Venus event. So this Venus event on April 10 and 11. And again, Venus is really bright. So this sort of makes this a little tricky, but it's actually going to pass very close to the Pleiades. So here's the 10th. So 9, 10, 11, sort of 10th and 11th of April. You can try to spot the Pleiades right near Venus. That'll be a neat one to see as well. All right, next up, another one from me is April 11th. That's Mercury at its greatest eastern elongation. So this will be the peak night for seeing Mercury in the evening sky around April 11th. Within a night or two after that, before a night or two around that date is when Mercury will be its greatest distance from the sun, and so it's at max visibility. So you'll be able to see it in a darkening sky. Here's 9 o'clock, but it'll be visible even better once the sky gets a little bit darker around 9:30 or so, and you'll be able to follow it down for a good distance. In a telescope, when objects are that wide of the sun, then they tend to be at the outer turn of their orbit. So you get this nice, half moon effect on the planet. You'll be looking through lots of atmosphere, so the view will be a little blurry, but you should be able to make out that it's definitely not a disk, that it's a half disk effect. So that's a neat one. Stay tuned. There's another one of these for Mercury coming up later in the year. All right, next one up. In May. So at this point, Jupiter will have done its it's conjunction with the sun and entered the morning sky by the time we get to May. So on the morning of May 17th, we've got this beautiful photo op of Jupiter shining close to the old crescent moon. So that'll be a neat one to see. Then we've got the next one I've got here is in June. So June 1st. Another cool one is Mars going right through the Beehive cluster. So here, let me just actually center on one of these guys. And you can watch this. Here's the kind of the May 31st, June 1st, June 2nd, June 3rd. That'd be great if somebody could get a composite sequence, a GIF, make a GIF of that. Wouldn't that be cool? So that's a homework for folks. All right, so we're halfway through the year now. All right, now we're going to move on. Another event for Mars. So Mars does a lot more swinging back and forth because of its proximity to the Earth. Mars is going to actually spend some time approaching Venus. So don't forget, Venus is still heading away from the sun. Mars is sort of heading in this direction. And on the 30th of June, they'll be at their closest proximity to one another. So if you want to catch them both in your binoculars, that'd be a great night. After that date, then they'll actually start pulling slowly apart again. So I've got that as 3.6 degrees of the two between the two planets on the 30th. All right, on July 7th, we get an event called Venus at its greatest illuminated extent. So Venus changes its size in a telescope as it moves closer and farther from us as it rounds the sun. At the same time, it changes its illuminated phase while it's doing its thing. So when it's beyond the sun, it's more gibbous. When it's between us and the sun, it's more of a crescent shape. And on the night of July 7th or so, we get the maximum combination of disk size and illumination that makes Venus appear its brightest in the sky. So it'll be magnitude minus 4.69 for several nights around July 7. So it'll be spectacular. It's practically bright in the sky. All right. Next one we've got is a Brian one. Brian's number 5 is July 13th. And that is the moon near the Pleiades. So the Mars had its turn. Now the moon is going to have its turn. And again, all these winter constellations will now cross the sun and enter the morning sky. So this is a pre-dawn event to look for. That'll be a neat photo op as well. That's another time where you could maybe take a look and see if you can see Earth shine, illuminating the moon's disk. All right, next one up is, okay, a Chris one. It's August 8th in the morning before noontime. And what I've identified, or what I've highlighted this one for, is to be able to see Jupiter in the daytime with your unaided eyes by using the moon as your guide. So what you're going to do is on that morning, the moon and Jupiter will be within a binoculars field of each other. So just point your binoculars on the moon. Remember, always be careful about the sun when you're using binoculars in daytime looking up. The sun's nowhere near them, of course, so we're fine. And if you put the moon near the top of the field of view, then see if you can spot the speck of Jupiter in the binoculars. It should work. I've seen it quite a few times. And then the challenge is to see if you can see Jupiter without the binoculars. So that's the trick. So what you're doing here is they're basically about, I can't see, I think it's about 4.5 degrees, 4.5 finger widths apart. And depending on when you're looking, so let me just center up Jupiter here. This is at 9 a.m. So to give you a sense of how high in the sky that is. So they'll be setting towards noontime. They're getting lower and lower. And you can see that the Jupiter's remaining below the moon just because of the way the moon's moving away while the sky is rotating at the same time. But you can start trying this. It's kind of cheating if you do it at 5 a.m. But by the time you get to 6, 7, 8, 9 a.m., then that counts as seeing Jupiter in the daytime without your binoculars. So bucket list, give it a try. I've done it, it works. All right, next up is the Perseid meteor shower. For that, I need to have these on. So the Perseid meteor shower peaks on the night of August 12th, 13th, as Brian's event number 6. He noted that the moon is only 8% illuminated crescent that night. So that's pretty good sky conditions for seeing meteors. And that'll be a treat for us to get a good Perseid show. All right, next up, we've got Brian's event number 7, which is the moon occulting the star Antares. Now, this is a mixed bag for Canadians because there are parts of the country where it works and parts of the country where it doesn't work. So I've got that kind of the best show of all will be kind of Toronto, Thunder Bay, center part of the country, where the sky will be sufficiently dark and the two objects will be sufficiently high above the horizon for the event. So that'll be a neat one. Let's see, I said the event will set in progress if you're in Montreal, and in the Maritimes or in Western Canada, you'll see the moon near the star beforehand or the moon near the star afterwards, but you won't necessarily see the event because it'll be daytime in the West Coast while it's happening. Okay, next one. Into September. So here we've got on September the 19th, we've got Venus at its greatest illuminated extent again. So we had it in the point where it was east of the sun in evening sky, and then it's going to drop down past the sun in conjunction, and then join the morning sky and reach that geometry again in the pre-dawn. And again, there's that sort of almost half illuminated appearance of it. So it'll be a peak of even brighter, magnitude minus 4.6. And that'll be the few mornings in advance of this date. So you can start looking kind of September 15th to 19th for the brightest Venus in the morning sky. Next up, we've got September 22nd. And now this is Mercury's greatest elongation, but in the morning sky. So this will be a really great appearance of Mercury for Canadians because Mercury will be sitting above or north of the ecliptic. The ecliptic will be quite upright, up and down against the eastern horizon. And you'll be able to spot Mercury quite easily after, around 5:30 a.m. and follow it up until at least 6 a.m., even a little past 6 a.m. before the sky gets too bright. So that'll be a great one as well. Okay, the eclipse. So here's the eclipse. It's a partial solar eclipse. This is actually an annular solar eclipse, and the track of the annularity touches down in the North Pacific near Seattle, sweeps diagonally across the US and through the Gulf of Mexico, and then down through Central America. So if you want to see the annular eclipse, you need to be somewhere on that track. But for Canadians who are sticking close to home, we're going to be seeing a partial eclipse. And the farther west you are, the better. So if you're living in, so this is Saskatoon, they're going to get, let's see, I wrote the notes here. I think you'll get, depending on where you are in the country, you'll get between 5% of the sun covered to 20% of the sun's diameter covered. Montreal is 29%. Maritimes is 5 to 20%. Montreal is 29%. Toronto is 39%. Winnipeg 53%. Calgary 70%. Vancouver 82%. So, and that'll happen in the morning at about 9:20 a.m. So it'll be a morning eclipse. The farther west, the farther east you are in the country, the higher the pair will be in the sky. All right, next up, almost done here. We've got the Orionid meteor shower is one I'm adding to the list. It's it's Brian's number 9 on October 21, 22. Basically, midnight to dawn is the best time to look for Orionid's meteors. Unfortunately, there'll be a 49% illuminated moon, but it'll set at 11:30 p.m. So you'll have the kind of post-midnight sky darker for seeing the meteors. One more here from me is on November 9th. We've got a pretty grouping of the crescent moon and Venus. As I said, the moon moves by its diameter every hour. So if you get up nice and early, you'll see it closer to Venus. If you get up later, then it'll be farther away. So it depends on your preference there. Again, possibly Earth shine on the moon that night. That'll be a neat one. And finally, Brian ends the year up on December 13th with his number 10, and that's the Geminid meteor shower, which peaks on December 13th overnight. That'll be during a new moon. So we've got a beautiful dark sky ready to go for Geminids. It's a great meteor shower. So hoping for clear skies. So that's it. I'll stop.
There's lots to look forward to this year. Somebody just, yeah, year full of events, busy time for astronomy viewers. For sure. We also had someone point out that helpful tip for daytime planetary hunting and avoid accidentally looking at the sun is to make sure you and your optics are standing in the shadow of a building and the sun. So the building kind of blocks it from getting to your optics.
That's a great idea. Perfect.
So thank you for that tip. I have never tried to view. I've been tempted to look at the moon through binoculars during the daytime, but I'm still a little too nervous for that. So I might have to use that tip one time. So any other questions about anything we've talked about so far? Is this list available for download? So this list, Chris's extra tips, they're not part of the download. You have to come back. We always have this episode up so you can keep watching it, as well as but all of the ones that Brian listed are in the Sky News issue. So there's about 10 out of, how many did you list here, Chris?
Well, I have 12, I guess there's 22 altogether.
Yeah, so 10 of the 12 is in that article. And as I said, this is always up on YouTube after. Where do you set up the 2023 list? Are you talking about in Stellarium? I think that was, Chris, that was your own list that you made up in Stellarium, right?
This bookmark file, I made that up. I can actually share it with anybody that wants to get in touch with me if you're interested. It's just a little text file.
If you want to share it with me, I might be able to just put it up with our other notes.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah.
Okay.
I can do that.
Perfect.
Just talk to me later and I'll get that. So.
Yeah, we'll get them up. And then we have another question. How does this compare to the 2023 almanac? Have you gone through the almanac yet, Chris?
No, since I kind of do that in the course of my typical work anyway. So I don't typically take a look at the almanac, but I don't know if the almanac would be quite as quite as picky about every one of these as we have been, but they'll definitely have a lot of the highlights for sure. Because I don't know if anybody has the almanac wants to speak on that.
I wish I don't have it on me, surprisingly. I usually steal peeks of it when I'm in the office. So yeah, maybe that's a challenge. See how many more things you can find in the almanac. Let us know if the almanac is missing anything, or I think we also have another question. Could you see Uranus's ring, or is that, well, I would say no, because we didn't know it had rings until we sent a space telescope out, right?
That's right. We're not looking at the Uranus's ring or Jupiter's ring for that matter, really, from ground-based amateur telescopes. But it's fun to think about. You can see some of Uranus's moons, though. If you have a nice dark sky and a nice big telescope, its moons are visible. We're actually, we're ending the prime period for looking at, well, Uranus, we've got a while yet, because Uranus is kind of between Mars and Jupiter in the sky. Neptune, we were definitely losing the window for, but we've got another, probably a couple months of Uranus viewing if you want to see them. But yeah, definitely you want to wait till night and zoom in with a big telescope to see any moons if you can.
And just two more comments before we move on, kind of linked. So someone said it in the future, if you can share maybe the list, if we have top 10s like this or top 22, maybe we can keep that in mind for sharing the Stellarium list before the event. So we are able to, they want to follow along, I think, while you're going through to see what it looks like at their location.
Well, I appreciate that, but sometimes I'm not finished until this morning, so it'd be hard to get them out to people in advance, but definitely
that makes sense.
We'll try to do more of that when we do some of our upcoming, night tours, celestial tours, that kind of thing.
We'll keep in mind that this is something people want. We'll try to do our best, but no promises.
Yeah, good idea.
And then following that, once we share the list, the best time to see from West Coast, East Coast would be to use Stellarium. and look up it for your specific location for when you would be able to see Mercury, Saturn, those types of things. Because it's hard, because we're such massive land mass, to be able to tell you exactly every single target, every single.
So most of the, almost all of the events that I showed, I think there are only a couple of exceptions where it would be radically different from one part of the country to the other. But really, it's all of the planetary conjunctions, the moon, the ones with they're partying with the moon. Those are all coast to coast events. Really, where it gets tricky is things that are happening at specific times. So, like the occultation of Antares and the eclipse, they're much more location dependent because they're happen at certain times. But almost everything else I showed you would be visible everywhere. So that's kind of cool.
Okay, thank you.
Speaking of which, that actually ties into our next topic, our next category, which are the lunar X. So I'm not sure if I've got a handy picture of the lunar X here. Let me see if I can bring one up. So what I've done is I've tabulated the appearances of the lunar X for Canadians. And it will get a little bit complicated. Let's see if I have it here. Here we go. I think this one. Okay. So we have a picture of it. Here we go. I do. All right, great. So the lunar X is a feature on the moon that happens when the sun is rising over the moon's surface and the terminator line lands at a longitude, a lunar longitude, or we call it a solar colongitude of 358 degrees. Now, just so what you know, what I'm talking about is if you imagine the North Pole and the South Pole of the moon, the kind of median center of the moon that faces Earth is the 0 coordinate system for the lunar latitude longitude, if you like. So the zero line, which would be the prime meridian, if you like, on Earth, but the corresponding prime meridian on the moon, would be considered 0 degrees east or west, and it would be the solar colongitude of 0. And that happens when the moon is at first quarter. So when the moon is half illuminated, the terminator is aligned up with the moon's 0 longitude line. But a few degrees before that, or about 7 degrees before that happens, when the moon is not quite at first quarter, the angle of the sunlight striking the edges of several craters, the craters Purbach, Lacaille, and Blanchinus, produce this significant or definitive X pattern that you can see on the moon's surface. And it's about a third of the way from the equator of the moon down to the South Pole along the terminator. The phenomenon builds over time for about 2.5 hours or so, and then it peaks in intensity and then it fades for about 2.5 hours. So it's about 4.5 total hours of window that you can see it a little bit before first quarter. Now, the trick is, when is first quarter going to happen where you live? And a lot of times of the month, the first quarter will be happening when the moon is below the horizon, because lunar phases are independent of Earth's rotation. But if this colongitude of 358 geometry happens while the moon is above the horizon for you, then you've either got a night sky or a daytime sky where the phenomenons happen. And so it is possible to see it in the daytime. One tip is to use polarized lenses. If you use a polarized glass and rotate it, you can actually minimize the brightness of the sky and increase the contrast on the moon. So again, it's also, you got to be safe about not aiming it near the sun, this kind of thing. But you can use polarized glass or eyeglasses, even movie 3D glasses. If you tilt your head at a certain angle, you can make the moon more contrasty in the daytime. But if it's a nighttime lunar X, then you're good to go. On the same night, we also get the lunar V. So this is the crater Euclid. The way it's illuminated gives you this little V. And some people think they see an L down near here, the South Pole. And then that little L there actually is a trio of craters that look like Mickey Mouse's ears and face down near here, which you can use to help guide you. There's even a backwards E in here. And then a crater is an O, you've got LOVE, you can do all kinds of things with that. So that's the lunar X. Here's a close-up view of the X. So you don't need a giant telescope to see that. You might be able to get it in binoculars. I can't remember if I've seen it in binoculars. I think I may have in my image stabilized binoculars, but definitely, definitely any backyard telescope will see a lunar X. So when are they happening? So the first one is going to happen, I believe it's across the whole country on January 28th. So we don't have to wait long. So here's January 28th at, let's see, 5:30 p.m. So 5:45. So that'll be around 15:45. So the sky will be just getting darker, at least in Saskatoon. And again, because we've got a few hours on either side, a couple of hours on either side, then it gives us the chance to see it. So here's the moon. I don't know if you can see 28th. It's kind of in here. On the Stellarium, the moon map on Stellarium is not super detailed, but that's basically where it is. So January 28th at 6:43 p.m. Eastern time, 5:43 p.m. Central, adjust from there. The next one would be on March 29th. So here we go, March 29th. Let's come back here a bit. In the late night, so this is 2300 and basically 2330. So 11:30 p.m. kind of Saskatoon time. So that'll be a bit earlier than that in West Coast. Whoops, where's my moon here? There we go. There's my moon up near Gemini. So that's your first quarter, that's your lunar X. By the way, that January 28th one, I forgot to mention it. That's the same night that we're paired up with Uranus. So the night you're looking at Uranus beside the moon is the night that you've got the lunar X at the same time on the moon. We've got one on the 27th of April. But the downside of this is it's actually one of these daytime ones. So let's see, where's my moon? There's the moon. So the moon will be just kind of rising in the east. And again, that's one of these daytime ones, so you want to be careful. And the last one I've got, a really decently viable one, is May 27th at 1 in the morning. So again, where's that one here? Let's see if I can find this one. So the moon will be sort of getting ready to set May 27th at 1 in the morning. So those are some opportunities to see the lunar X and V and backwards E and L maybe. See, let us know what you get to see. Any questions on that?
I'm not sure. Somebody said, is this the peak related?
I'm giving you the peaks. Yes. So you've got a couple of hours on either side of those peaks to play with.
Okay,
and you can actually look up lunar X for the year. If you do a Google search on that, you'll see various websites have that listed. And if anybody wants to know, I can actually share the list as well to anybody that's curious about it. So I'm happy to do that. Or I can give it to Samantha and she can post it on the show page.
Sounds good.
All right.
Yeah, I think no more questions about that.
Perfect. All right, last one up. I mentioned it to the folks that were joining us at the beginning that I got up early on, I think it was Saturday morning or Sunday morning, to look at the moon because I was doing the Isabel Williams Lunar Observing Program, and I wanted to see something called Mare Orientale. Mare Orientale is a feature that's on the very edge of the moon, and we typically don't get to see it very clearly. Just going to bring up the moon nomenclature here. And I guess we're going to bring up the moon. Let's go. I'm going to go to 5 in the morning, a few mornings ago. There we go. Yeah, around the 15th. So because the moon's orbit is tilted 5 degrees from the Earth's orbital plane, and the moon's axial rotation axis is tilted by about 1.5 degrees from vertical to the solar system's sort of plane, and the moon's orbit is elliptical, all three of those things combine to produce an effect of libration where the moon actually wobbles and nods. And I can actually show you how that looks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the moon to the ecliptic. I'm going to turn off the labels here a second. Give me 1 second. Should have done this first. Like this. I'm going to hide the daylight. Hide this. I'm going to hide the stars. And I'm going to speed things up. Here we go. Oops. Speed things up. So what you're seeing is that wobbling effect sped up. So you're going to see the moon pulse in size because the elliptical orbit brings it closer and farther. So that's our supermoon mini moon effect. Then you're also going to see the moon nod up and down and wobble left and right a little bit. And so you can watch for objects that are near the edge of the moon, get closer to the limb at times and farther from the limb at times. So that's kind of a neat phenomenon. One of the famous ones to check out is Mare Crisium, the round dark patch. You can see it's going higher and closer to the edge here. And then later on, it'll drop away from it again, farther away and move down. So that's that effect sped up so you can see it without, the Earth getting in the way and all those other things. I'm just going to pause this and go back. So the effect is going to happen. Let me just do this. There we go. So if you want to see the features on the edge of the moon, some of those are called for in the Isabel Williams Observing Program. The best time you can do that are indicated actually in the Observer's Handbook. So if you go into the monthly pages of the Observer's Handbook, you see this mysterious row of pictures of the moon down the side. And beside the moon, it shows the moon's phase on a range of dates. And it also shows a little dot. And the dot migrates around the edge of the moon as you go through the month. And that dot is indicating the edge of the moon that's pointing earthward on that given date. So if you want to see an object that's on the western side of the moon, for example, you need to find a date when one of the dots is close to the western edge of the circle. And the moon also has to be illuminated. That part of the moon also has to be lit at the same time. So you'll see there are cases where, maybe the western edge is pointed towards us, but it's the phase of the moon where that's not in sunshine. So you need to sort of go through it and figure out when you're going to see that. So what I did here, let me just pick up on the moon. Let's bring it up into view here. And I'll show you a couple of examples of what you can look for.
Can you just let us know what page of the Observer's Handbook we're looking at for that?
Sure. Set up my page here. So the monthly event pages start on the page 98, and there are 2 pages per month. And you can also see there's a little note here just under this table of planets. There's a little section called Moon, and it actually tells you the librations in longitude, which is east and west, the sort of saying no, and latitude saying yes, so north, south, east, and west. But it's actually easier to use the little diagrams on the opposite page for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the moon pretty well to a full moon. These features are not necessarily best to see while the moon is full, but by having a full moon, it actually lets me show you where they are. So I'll just show you what some of these are. So I'm going to bring up the moon nomenclature. And I'm going to bring up my bookmarks. There's libration. Yep. So the one I was chasing was, let me just highlight them all. So the blue symbols that you're seeing are the various ones around the edge of the moon. The one I was chasing was Mare Orientale. So Mare Orientale is, most of it is actually out of sight beyond the edge of the moon, but we can see the rings, the basin rings that extend past that edge. And this was visible, as I said, the other day. The next time you can see it nicely will be, let's see here. So March 10th, late at night, you'll be able to see the moon's western limb tilted towards Earth. You'll be able to see Mare Orientale. And a lot of these blue ones, by the way, pause here, are in the Isabel Williams program. So if you do want to dip into that program, you'll need to see a lot of these for your optional features. So you've got Mare Orientale down here. By the way, the way to kind of find it is to use the dark crater Grimaldi and the bright crater Burgess, and it sort of sits on the edge between those two easy to see features. Then we've got also in Isabel Williams, we've got these craters named Ulu Bay and Aston, which are on the edge. And then there's one called Markov, which is up here as well, which is visible around that time. At the end of January, sort of January 28 to 30th, the eastern limb of the moon will be preferentially visible. And that'll let you see Mare Marginis. So where's Mare Marginis? That's up here. Here's Mare Marginis is up here. And then we've got Mare Smithii, which will be a dark stain just near the moon's edge. And then Mare Australa. And then on February 5th, we're going to get the south pole of the moon visible. That's going to give us these craters like Bailey and Drygalski. And then on August 1st, August 1 to 3 and August 28 is when we're going to be able to see the North Pole features. And again, this is a little bit confusing because the moon is tilted. If I set it up to north up, then you can sort of see there's the North Pole up here. So we've got this crater Plaskett, Democritus, things like that. So Plaskett is the only feature I've not yet seen on the Isabel Williams. So I'm going to set my calendar to remind me to check it out in August. Now, by the way, speaking of August, so August brings us a neat lunar event, and that is that August will have 2 full moons this year. So the full moon is around August 1st and another full moon on the 30th. The August 1st full moon will happen about 11.5 hours before perigee, making it a supermoon. A supermoon is when the moon looks bigger because it's full while it's closer to the Earth. And then on the 30th of August, we have another full moon. We have time to fit 2 of them into the month. That one's going to happen only 9.5 hours after perigee, which gives us the largest full moon of the year of 2023. It'll be about 8% larger than average. Can you see that in the sky? Maybe look a little brighter, look a little bigger. Now, under some definitions, that August 30th moon, full moon, will also be a blue moon, because the blue moon can be the second full moon within a calendar month. It's also defined to be the third full moon of 4 in a season. And I didn't do the math to see whether this would qualify for that or not. But that'll be a kind of a neat thing about August. And technically, the prior moon on July 3rd will be a supermoon, and the following full moon on September 29th will be a full supermoon too, but less so, not quite as big as the August ones. So there you go.
Thank you. Somebody else just mentioned in the chat, if you have your RAS calendar, this is right on that calendar as well. So if you're looking for these points, check out that.
Thanks for the reminder. I don't happen to have RAS calendar yet, so
I don't have one yet either. I'm looking at, I have the old one. I will be honest, I haven't gotten the new one because we were running low in stock, and I wanted to make sure everybody else got a chance to get it before I snapped it up. So.
By the way, if anybody has downloaded the digital ebook by Alan Chu called the Lunar Photographic Moon Book, if you Google Alan Chu's website, he offers it as a download. I believe he still does. It certainly did in a while ago. He has a nice list of libration features on page 195, and he has actually close-ups of the moon's limb at different times of the cycle, where you can see the different targets and craters that he's talking about. So there we go. And that's it for the year. I hope everybody gets clear skies and a chance to see all these neat events.
It gives us some hope as we move into the time of the year where observing is not the best. At least there's going to be some exciting events coming up. So what's the name of the ebook? I'll try to find it.
It's called Alan Chew's Photographic Moon. Let's see if I can find
Photographic Moon.
Alan Chew photo.
Oh, Photographic Moon Atlas. It's by Cambridge Press.
That's the commercial one. That's the one you can buy. I think he has a website. Alan Chew Photographic.
Oh, I think I found it.
Here we go. I'll put it in the chat. It's alanchewhk.com. I'll put it in the chat. There you go. Good. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to share with everybody. Let me just do this. I thought this was really worth sharing. One of the members of the Toronto Centre posted this animated GIF, Charles Young. There's an animated GIF of Comet 2022 E3. Over several nights, you can see it moving across the stars.
Oh, wow.
In this light green color.
So
shout out to Charles, well done.
Good job.
All right. So time for finest NGC. Unless you had any other questions.
I fixed it. No, we're good. You sent to host and panelists the link. Just had to reshare.
Oh, okay. Thanks for fixing that. Yeah.
No worries. And are we on to the NGC corner?
Yes.
Okay. So the finest NGC corner. This is also for me when I edit this section out to its own video. So I'll let you get started. Just a heads up, we are again doing every time we do an episode, we have put all of the targets we talk about, as well as Chris's notes, into a PDF with some finder charts. That will be coming. It's a little bit delayed this week. We're hoping to have it up by the end of this week, early next week. And that is at ras.ca/finest NGCs, I think it's called. Finest minutes, sorry. I will send something in the chat.
So this is a great week for getting out under the stars. It's a moonless week. We're going to have our new moon on Friday. So we've got all this week with dark sky for evening observing, and a great time to tackle some of these objects. The whole purpose of doing this is to give people fresh things to see beyond the Messier objects. So these are the finest NGC targets. I'm going to mention 5 of them that are residuals left over from the autumn group, because it's not until really later in the night that the winter targets get nice and high. But a lot of the autumn ones are still around thanks to the early sunsets. So the first one I've got to mention is finest NGC number 15, and it's called the Skull Nebula, or the Soap Bubble Nebula. It's in Cetus, the whale. You can see here, there's Cetus's head, his body, and his tail. There's Jupiter, just to give you the context of where you're hunting for. This is the sky around 8 p.m. The sky is actually dark after 6:30. In Toronto, at least, the astronomical twilight is over at about 6:30. So the sky is still fully dark around 6:30 to 7 p.m., depending on where you are in the country. And I recommend tackling this one in early evening. So while it's still close to the culminating point, due south. Otherwise, if you wait a little bit longer, it's going to sink down into the west. And the Skull Nebula is a planetary nebula. It was discovered by William Herschel. Whoops, where are my planetary nebulas? I turned them off before. Here we go. Discovered by William Herschel on November 27, 1785. It's this category 5, number 25. You need a relatively large telescope and or very dark skies. You can see it's not a very bright object. You can see these stars, these field stars, with a smaller telescope, but you'll have trouble seeing the nebula itself. It's also called Caldwell 56, which is named for Sir Patrick Moore's list of his own top 110 objects in the sky that aren't Messier's. It's pretty low in the southern, it's pretty low in the sky for Canadians. So that's why you do want to sort of tackle it while it's close to culminating if you can. You can look for a triangle. So if you can see the stars of Cetus, and you can find the trio of Deneb, which is Eta, Ceti, Dipta, which is Beta, and Deneb Kaitos, which is Iota. If you can find that triangle, then point your finder scope kind of central to that triangle, and that's where the Skull Nebula is. You can also, when I found it in my star hopping, I used this line of Alnitham. These are the kind of Phi 1, Phi 2, Phi 3, Phi 4 Ceti stars. So if you can see those even in your binoculars, then you'll know where to point your telescope, sort of just below that. And by the way, the distance below those would be about 1 degree. So it's really in that neighborhood. If you're using a nice wide field of view, you'll even be able to fit either of these stars in the eyepiece with the Skull Nebula, but you want to nudge them out of the way when you're really looking at the dimmer object. So this object is optimal at around 65 power. When you're looking at it, I think I can put up the eyepiece view here. Let's see, I've got, whoops, let me go back. I hadn't selected the skull yet. Here we go. So that's kind of a telescope view at 65 power. This is through a 6-inch Newtonian reflector using a 14 millimeter Plössl eyepiece. What you want to note for when you're looking at it is you want to look for the shape and structure of the nebulosity. Can you see the skull effect? Sort of these dark voids that give the mouth and the eye appearance. Can you see the central star, the 12th magnitude central star? Look for the field stars that are superimposed in and around the nebula, and check that out. And if you have an oxygen 3 filter or a UHC filter, highly recommended to enhance the nebula itself. This one's about 1,600 light years away from us. All right, next we've got what Samantha has behind her head. It's NGC 936.
I think I have to talk for them to be able to see it here.
There we go.
There you can see
This one's
me.
at the other end of Cetus. There you go. This one's actually near the star Mira. We covered Mira during our variable star sessions. So it's kind of between Mira and Messier 77 in Cetus. Its nickname is Darth Vader Starfighter. It's a small but condensed barred spiral galaxy. So there you go. You can see it in Samantha's background or here. So there's the center core of the galaxy, the bar stretching across it, and then the ring-like disk or halo around the object. Really, really cool. It was discovered by William Herschel in January of 1785. It's his object 4-23, so 23rd object in his class 4. I think he thought it was a planetary nebula, which is why he put it in that category. The neat thing is that the core is actually condensed and bright enough for smaller telescopes. You'll need a bigger scope to see more of the structure, but you can certainly find it and see part of it in a smaller telescope. I have it down as midway between the star Mira, the star Delta Ceti. So let me just bring up my pointers here. So I think this is Delta Ceti and the star 66 Ceti. So if you see 66 Ceti and Delta Ceti, it's kind of almost midway between those two stars. So if you point your finder in that general area, you'll pick it up. What I did is I actually star hopped from Delta, which is this star here. I found 75 Ceti, which is a relatively bright star. And then I just moved the telescope west by 1 degree to pick it up. You'll want to use averted vision. You'll want to look for its orientation, how it's angled in the sky, its shape. Look for any field stars around it. You can see here there's a sort of a triangle shape of star. This is actually another little galaxy in the background. Yeah, and there are some other galaxies in the neighborhood. There's a 941 here and 955 here as well that you could check out for. I used about 100x. So this is 65x. You probably want to use about 100 power on it. Remember, don't filter galaxies. So that's that one. Up next, we've got NGC 869, NGC 864, sorry, 884, better known as the double cluster. So, here's an example where something that's binoculars target, naked eye target from a dark sky is in the finest NGC. So not all of the finest NGCs are out of reach of beginners. So the double cluster is up here in the space between Cassiopeia's W and Perseus's bright star Murphak. Really an autumn showpiece discovered by William Herschel in November 1st, 1788. So they're number 33 and 34 on his class 6 targets. Each of the clusters are about the size of the full moon, and the centers are separated by about the diameter of the moon. So they're really a fantastic target to look at in binoculars. As I said, you can probably see it with your unaided eyes if you get away from the city lights on a moonless night. You can also, if you're not sure about yourself, again, you can find Murphak and Navi and kind of aim right between the two stars, and that's where you'll pick it up. Now, when you're looking at it, if you want to zoom in with a telescope, don't over magnify, say 35 power, that kind of thing. And you want to start sort of noting the distinctive individual characteristics of the two clusters. So the lower one here, 884, is more sort of sparse, less concentrated. The northerly one, 869, is more dense. You're also going to be looking at the various stars that populate the cluster and look for things that are a little bit different. So for example, you can see that not every star here in the view is a blue-white star. We've got some different colors coming in. So that's the sort of thing you want to be noting in your log looking at these objects. They're about 7,100 light years away in the Perseus arm of the galaxy. Okay, I got two more. One is the Perseus lenticular galaxy. So if I swing around here and look at Murphak, by the way, Murphak is fantastic in binoculars because it's got a neat clump of stars around it. But if you look down the arm of Perseus to the west, you've got the variable star Algol. And if you look just to the direction of Triangulum, you've got the Perseus lenticular galaxy. Perseus lenticular galaxy is a medium-sized kind of barred lenticular galaxy. You don't get a lot of the structure on this one because it's lenticular galaxies are not spirals. They're more of just a blob, a shape. Discovered by William Herschel on October 18th of 1786. It's number 156 on his class 1. Its center is dense enough to be visible in, say, a 4-inch telescope, and definitely a larger telescope in darker skies will give you more and more of the size of it. It's about midway between Algol, so if you find Algol, and Mizan, which is one of the corners of the Triangulum, then it's about midway and a little bit higher than the center point between those two stars. So that kind of gives you a way of getting close to it. Let's see, I've got several medium bright stars in the neighborhood to pay attention to. I think use around 60 power, maybe even a little bit higher, but don't search with a high power. You want to search with a lower power. Now, some people talk about it being a little bit peculiar. So if I zoom in here, you can see that there's kind of a little spur off one end that won't be visible that well in amateur telescopes, but it's considered an ARP galaxy, a peculiar galaxy from that catalog. It's about 34 million light years away. And while you're in the neighborhood, you can look for the Silver Needle galaxy, which is, or Silver Surfer, Silver Needle, which is just in the neighborhood. We've covered that one before. This is a really nice object in backyard telescopes, amateur telescopes. Okay, last up, still in Perseus, is the Fossil Footprint Nebula. Where's my Fossil Footprint Nebula? Just find it here. So again, if you start with Murphak, when you're looking at Perseus, if you notice, And again, Perseus rotates its angle through the night because it's a circumpolar constellation. But if you can find Murphak and Algol, you want to kind of make a right angle, east of those. And you can actually follow Perseus's arm. There's a number of sort of medium bright stars that curl down and make kind of an arm here. And the Fossil Footprint Nebula is near this Lambda Persei star. This is a great object. Stephen O'Meara, the famous popular astronomy author, he sort of describes it as an object that's visually small but photographically big, because the center of it is bright and visible in medium and small telescopes. But the rest of it, you need either to take an image or have a really dark sky and a really big aperture to see more of it. He kind of imagines there being lobes of gas that sort of stretch out and make it look like a sort of a three-toed dinosaur foot, that sort of thing. That's where he gives that nickname from. The way I find it, the way I recommend finding it, is that you can look for Lambda, if you can find Lambda Persei, or you could point your scope midway between Epsilon Persei or Epsilon Auriga. Let's see if I can find that one. So let's see, Epsilon, I think should be Almaz. So if you make a line from one of those three kid stars near Capella and draw an imaginary line up to the head of Perseus at Miriam, then the fossil footprint is right on that midline between them. So that's another way you could find it. Okay, in a telescope, that gives you a sense of it at 60 power. So you probably want to use less than that. So use your 25mm eyepiece to be able to fit nicely the whole object in the view. When you're looking, you can zoom in to look at the little cluster of stars that are born in the center of it. You can look for the shape of the nebula, the structure, see if you can see any of the bright little sort of fingernails of brightness, and then the dark voids that are scattered here and there. Depending on your conditions, you might see more or less of that. You definitely want to use averted vision. Definitely want to use your UHC high contrast filters or your oxygen 3 filters to help. This one's about 12,000 light years away, and that's it. Now, I will mention just before I wrap up here that there are 4 more autumn finest NGCs in Cepheus, but because Cepheus is sort of, let me just bring these up, because Cepheus is kind of dropping to the west side of Polaris during evening, it's not the best time to chase them down. So we'll save those and we'll cover them in the summer, because once we get to say July, they'll be visible kind of late night. So we'll do them then. And that's it.
Any questions? We have thank you for all the tips and useful information, Chris, in the chat. And I don't know how you do it every single time, right at 5 o'clock. He told me he didn't plan this, but he knows. Okay.
It's not my first time. It's more like my 65th time. So I'm getting used to it.
Yeah, more like 60 or something more. Okay, so we are still in the process of making the schedule for our topics in the upcoming weeks. So if you're interested in taking a sneak peek, it will post on our website. It's available. But we're back to our regular schedule. So I think February 1st is the next time we will be back. We'll be coming back. No, January 31st, right? January 31st.
2 weeks.
As our next episode, and stay tuned. So
terrific. Yeah. So for those asking for the detail, to clarify the details on the positioning, don't worry, Samantha includes all these notes in her online post. So she'll go to RASCA and you'll find all my notes that I've mentioned there.
Yeah, it'll be up by the end of the week. Yeah. So okay.
Perfect. Clear skies, everybody. Good luck with the moonless nights this week, and hope you get clear skies for the comets. So